The year is 1995, and Green Day were riding it high after hitting it big with their major label debut, Dookie, released in 1994, as the album launched the band and arguably pop-punk as a genre into the mainstream. All this was great in terms of success, however, internally things were quite different for them. Signing to major label Reprise Records saw them accused of being sellouts by the underground punk community of the San Francisco Bay Area, where Green Day got their start, and this bitterness towards them still lingered nearly 2 years later. Sure, they got famous in a relatively short amount of time and were the face of punk rock for a mainstream audience, but they were now ousted from the tight-knit circle they called home for so long. Coupled with their relentless touring schedule, this began to eat away at the band, specifically frontman Billie Joe Armstrong, who would go on to say, quote, "I couldn't find the strength to convince myself that what I was doing was a good thing. I was in a band that was huge because it was supposed to be huge, because our songs were that good. But I couldn't even feel that I was doing the right thing because it felt like I was making so many people angry. That's where I became so confused and got really stupid. I would never want to live that part of my life over again." Alongside that, Armstrong would get married, and both he and drummer Trey Cool would become parents. Amidst all of these massive changes in the band's life, they were still motivated to keep working on new material and keep pushing forwards. As these alien feelings swirled, Green Day decided to channel them into their major label follow-up, an album that would contain a heavier, more hardcore punk rock sound, as a way to reaffirm to those who turned their backs on them for signing to a major label that they weren't forgetting their roots. The guitar tone would be thicker, the bass more audible, the drums more driving, and lyrics that were darker, angst-filled, and nihilistic in comparison to Dookie. Bassist Mike Dirnt would state, quote, "There was a real urgency to stake our claim and say, no, we belong here. It was really important to us to make sure that people knew that we weren't just a flash in the pan." Dookie's producer Rob Cavallo would return for the album, and recording would start in December of 1994 at Hyde Street Studios in San Francisco, and wrap in May of 1995. With a total of 21 songs recorded, with a handful being written beforehand, as Trey Cool would state in a 1995 interview that, quote, "We had the songs already, we just had to get them tight and the structure of them, the breaks, the guitar solos. I'm sorry, none." Throughout, the band drank copious amounts of caffeine to squeeze the most energy possible into the songs. According to Cavallo, Trey changed his cymbals on nearly every song, while he and Billie Joe lined up guitar amps and decided which sounded the best. The production would be mostly smooth sailing, apart from one incident I'll discuss later, although it is speculated that the band may have been using hard drugs like methamphetamine during this time. These claims are somewhat disputed, as they had previously dabbled in that substance in the past, and to my knowledge they never came out and fully admitted to using them during the production of this album in particular. However, use of the drug is a common motif throughout many of the songs. The album went through several working titles, with notable ones such as Tightwad Hill and Jesus Christ Supermarket, but the final name was settled on when the band asked artist Winston Smith, a friend of Trey Cool, for album artwork. The artwork they chose to be the cover is a piece called "God Told Me to Skin You Alive." However, the version they used as the album art was slightly altered to feature Billie Joe's signature blue guitar, and being zoomed in. However, on vinyl pressings and the CD booklet, the full art is visible. The three skulls on the piece also reference each of the members of the band. When they asked Smith how he was able to create such detailed art, he simply replied with, quote, "It's easy for me because I'm an insomniac." And that's how the name of the album was decided. Insomniac was originally the title of the song Brain Stew, but they opted to make it the title of the album instead, with Armstrong stating that the name of the album comes from his own insomnia from being woken up by his then newborn child in the middle of the night. Again, it may have also been from drugs. Years later, Armstrong said that he regrets changing the title. After releasing the song Jar, Jason Andrew-Elva, on the soundtrack for the movie Angus in July of 1995, the lead single for the album, Geek Stink Breath, released on September 25th, 1995, alongside an accompanying music video. However, the song debuted on Saturday Night Live in 1994 in defiance of management who wanted the band to play their hit song, Basket Case. According to Songfacts.com, Green Day originally didn't want to do any music videos for Insomniac, but when Billie Joe found out that a friend of his had to get a tooth pulled due to heavy meth use, he got the idea for the video, as it shows a graphic depiction of a tooth extraction, which was the actual real-life dental procedure of Armstrong's friend. The video was so gross, in fact, that MTV banned it from its daytime airwaves and was only broadcast late at night. All things considered, it was a decent success. Insomniac would be released on October 10th, 1995, and wasn't a runaway hit, much like its predecessor, probably due to the near-press blackout and nearly every single song containing profanity. But it was by no means a flop, with it selling over 100,000 copies in a week, debuting at number 2 on the Billboard 200, and eventually being certified 2 times platinum by the RIAA in February 1996. but in comparison to the massive success of Dookie, it was considered a bit of a commercial disappointment. The critical reception towards it, on the other hand, was generally positive upon release, although a common critique of the album was that it sounded too similar to Dookie and that a majority of the songs blended together. Many also made the comparison to Nirvana's third album, In Utero, with how bleak the lyrics were and that it was the band returning to their roots. And although it came out the following year, I'd argue it's a similar case to Pinkerton by Weezer, with how the follow-up to the breakout success went in a much darker direction, even if the critical response to Insomniac wasn't as harsh. Despite all of this, the album still did better than the band originally anticipated. In the aftermath of the album, Green Day embarked on a massive worldwide tour at the start of 1996, this time playing massive arena venues much like the later shows of the Dookie tours. Unfortunately, this took a toll on the band themselves. As Billy Joe Armstrong would remark, quote, "We were becoming the things we hated playing those big arenas. It was beginning to not be fun anymore." This, coupled with feelings of homesickness from being separated from their families, Green Day opted to cancel the majority of the European leg of the Insomniac tour. However, they still continued to write new songs during this time, as by the start of 1997, they had written a ton of new material, most of which would go on to become their fifth studio album, Nimrod. In retrospect, Armstrong would state in Kerrang! Magazine, quote, "The fact that the album came out like a year and a half after Dookie was us trying to cut off the bull in its tracks and just keep making music. That's all we wanted to do, keep making music." Sometimes I feel that Insomniac is the most honest record I ever made at the particular moment that it was written and recorded. These days, Insomniac is generally regarded as one of Green Day's better works, and is a fan favorite among many. And in 2020, for the record's 25th anniversary, a deluxe edition was released on vinyl and streaming, which contained exclusive, previously unreleased live performances of the songs in Prague. Now, I usually like to leave my opinions on things until the end, but I feel like now is the best time for me to discuss my thoughts on the album before I get into the individual songs. I first listened to Insomniac in early to mid-2022, during the Green Day binge I went on that year. It was only the fourth album of theirs I listened to, as prior I heard American Idiot, Dookie, and 21st Century Breakdown, in that order. So Insomniac felt like the natural next step. After my first listen to the album, I remember liking it, but I struggled to recall any of the songs aside from Brain Stew, as I too thought that a lot of the songs sounded the same. And what probably didn't help is that Nimrod was the album I listened to right after it. However, it wasn't until February of 2023 that I decided to give the album another shot, and I enjoyed it a lot more and was actually able to remember quite a lot of the tracks, with a lot of them becoming personal favorites of mine. However, I still think that a majority of the songs sound very similar to one another, but that sound isn't a bad sound. I'm still enjoying myself when listening to them. I personally really appreciate the album now, and it's easily in my top 5 Green Day albums, even if I'd probably put it at number 5. With the history of the album as a whole and my thoughts of it out of the way, I can finally get into the songs themselves and discuss what makes Insomniac such an interesting album in Green Day's discography. The album kicks things off with a song that pulls no punches, Armitage Shanks, which Armstrong named after a toilet company while demoing material at the BBC in 1994, right before the release of Dookie. It also debuted live at the MTV Music Awards in September 1994, and much like they'd later do with Geek Stink Breath, they played Armitage Shanks instead of Basket Case. The song does a great job at setting the tone and sound for the rest of the record. It's loud and punchy with some pretty dark, if borderline unintelligible lyrics. For those who expected Green Day to sound more poppy following them getting signed, a straightforward punk sound certainly wasn't that. The song's subject matter is primarily about panic, self-doubt, and distrust in oneself, which are all common themes throughout the record. The title of the track also potentially is a metaphor for one's life going down the drain. And at the last chorus, the lyrics change from catastrophic to claustrophobic, which may either imply that the narrator knows that this worldview is narrow, or that these emotions feel like they're closing in on them, and they can't do anything to change it. I also really like the... I'm usually not a big fan of whoa-ohs and na-na-nas in songs, but they're used sparingly here, and they're a nice touch. Brat is a song that's written from the perspective of some snobby rich kid waiting for their parents to die of old age so they can get the inheritance money, with the opening line, "Mom and Dad don't look so hot these days, I get it over them." However, it's sung from this character's perspective as a way of showing the listener just how infuriating these kinds of people can be, the people who were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. Now, of course, not every kid born into privilege ends up being like this, But to the ones who are, this song is a massive middle finger. The chorus also touches on how this person has really no direction because they don't want to get a job, and the inheritance money is the only thing they have to look forward to. I also have a slight hunch that this song is a jab at the bands who didn't have to earn their success like Green Day. Stuck With Me was the second single released exclusively in the UK in December of 1995. Originally, the song had the title of All Right, with Stuck With Me being the name of another track. However, there was a rumored studio mix-up where the song that wound up being named Stuck With Me was given that name instead. The band thought that the name still fit the song, so they went along with it. The song that originally had the name Stuck With Me went on to become Do Da Da as a reference to the syllables in Stuck With Me, and was later released as a B-side. The topic of the song is kind of vague. The first verse discusses class systems, while the chorus is about feeling like a total loser, or maybe it's meant to be taken sarcastically and that the world is making you feel like a total loser. The second verse seems like a direct shot at those who call them sellouts with the line, "Throw me back into the gutter 'cause it's alright. Find another place you're fuckers and I'm down the hill." I also think that the song may be about not feeling like you fit in and can't stand up for yourself. The first verse especially mentions this feeling of almost imposter syndrome. Also, the part in the bridge that goes like, that is just so satisfying to me, and easily the highlight of the song. The video was directed by Mark Core and features the band in black and white intercut between animated footage of the album cover. While this video can get lost in the shuffle at times, I think that the colorful artwork being animated with the desaturated band to contrast really makes it worthwhile, as the cover of the album just feels so alive. I really think this video stands out and is an underrated gem. Up next is Geek Sink Breath, the lead single for the album, starting with that killer guitar riff. This song touches on drug addiction, specifically to speed, mentioned directly in the line, "I'm blowing a team with the but it's not glorifying that lifestyle or about the fun of doing drugs. Instead, it's painted in an unflattering way. Armstrong would comment on the song saying, quote, "It's not really for speed and it's not really against it. It just describes the state of mind and the destructiveness it had on me personally. I liked speed because I wanted some rocket fuel. I wanted to think. That's the difference between us and the grunge scene. We wanted to go faster." The track describes the side effects of heavy meth usage, from tooth decay to facial scabs. The song may not have an overt anti-drug message, according to Armstrong, but this, coupled with the grisly tooth removal music video, probably did more to discourage drug use than any DARE program. I think that this song could also be from a character's perspective, but this one would be bringing in personal life experiences from Armstrong. The first half and chorus basically is saying that he knows he's throwing his life down the drain and that it's bad for him. "I'm on a mission, I made my decision later about the self-destruction." But the addiction has taken over so much that there's nothing he can really do, as it's all that he has, even if it's actively making his life worse. "Oh, I don't know what I want, that's all that I've got, little pickets gets off my face." The rest of the song goes on to describe the effects of meth use in vague-ish detail, so it's not in your face or preachy, but gives enough information so you know that whatever he's singing about, it isn't good. The best example of this is in the line in verse 2. "I found a treasure filled with sick pleasure, and it sits on a thin white line." One last side effect is listed at the end: geek, stink, breath. Enough talking about drug addiction, onto something more fun. No Pride certainly isn't fun. It's one of my favorites off the album, though. This song is also pretty scatterbrained, with it being about that values and beliefs lead to conflict, while also maybe being about how the band themselves was kicked out of the underground punk community. It honestly is pretty similar to Stuck With Me in that way. On a personal note, I remember listening to this song pretty soon after I re-listened to the album in mid-February of 2023, mainly because I liked it and I didn't want to forget the song again. And I vividly recall looking out of my bedroom window, and something about this song and how the light was reflecting off of the snow really just gave me a strange feeling. I don't really know how to describe it. As I stated earlier, the song mainly talks about how beliefs inherently cause division, and that most of these values are based on obsolete moral principles that border on hypocrisy. I think the line that best sums up this sentiment is, "To hell with unity, separation will kill us all." The chorus is pretty much about how you should just throw out your values, as it's the only way to stay alive in a world where there's fighting over nonsense. It's an oddly political song if you look at it through that lens, but I can't help but notice some parallels to how the band was feeling at this time, and how this song could be read as a middle finger to the punk scene's toxicity to the band selling out. If taken in this context, I think the song, and especially the chorus, means something like, hey, who are you to decide who is and isn't real punk? If anything, you're gatekeeping because we haven't changed. You may preach togetherness, but in reality, it only causes further division. Alright, time for the song where Billy Joe Armstrong is the most unintelligible, and it's not even close. Babs Uvula Who. Yeah, and somehow I'm gonna have to try and understand these lyrics. The title of the song was taken from an old SNL sketch, which I don't think has literally anything to do with the song, as originally the title was All Wound Up, and the track is about the rage caused by feeling like you keep f***ing everything up, all described in short bursts of metaphors, mostly describing a sense of fury. A recurring motif of the song is the line, all wound up, and it's always one of the lyrics that you can clearly hear Armstrong sing, almost as it's calling attention to how anxiety-ridden and stifled the narrator is. It's pretty simple in that regard. I think it's safe to say that this song's themes of feeling like you keep screwing everything up relate to how Green Day felt at the time, like they weren't doing the right thing. I was gonna mention something about the chorus, but there's a lot of conflicting versions of it from even the most official of sources. Like, lyricfind.com says it's this, while genius.com says it's this, and Green Day FM says something else. The reason for it is that in the official liner notes, the chorus isn't printed, so this is literally just a hash pipe situation. Now, if there's a song that's overtly targeting the people who called Green Day sellouts, it's 86. With other songs like No Pride or Stuck With Me, their subject matter is still vague enough to where they can still fit in with the themes of angst and anxiety that run throughout the rest of the album. 86, however, is a different case, as it's directly referencing how the band was kicked out of the underground California punk scene, specifically the all-ages venue 924 Gilman Street, where Green Day got their start and gained a following. The band signing to a major label prior to the release of Dookie saw them banned from performing at Gilman Street altogether and shunned from the community they called home for years, with some even saying they'd physically assault the band if they ever returned. Armstrong stated in reference to the song's origins, quote, "It's kind of about this conversation I had when I went back to Gilman last December, 1994. I ran into this old friend of mine, and all he could say was, 'Wow, what the f*** are you doing here?' This conversation, I'm almost certain, directly inspired the line in verse 1, 'What brings you around? Did you lose something the last time you were here?' And in verse 2, 'Exit out the back. Let never show your head around again.' While the chorus repeats the line, 'There's no return from 86. Well, at the end, it's bookended with, 'Don't even try.' For those who for some reason don't know, in this context, 86 means getting kicked out or removed from an establishment, not the year. While the following line obviously reinforces the sentiment that they aren't welcome back. However, since Green Day was banned from Gilman Street, they've since let bygones be bygones and have even played a gig there once in 2015, as well as filming their video for the song Revolution Radio at the venue. This song also received a very limited CD single release. Panic Song, or as it was titled during production, Riot Song. I love unintentional foreshadowing of completely unrelated things. You know when I said earlier that the production was mostly smooth sailing? Well, I put that mostly at the start because of this song in particular, as Trey Cool ended up tearing the calluses on his hands while recording the drums in this song's intro, and had to lean against a wall in between takes. Rob Cavallo would later describe the drummer's hands as a, quote, bloody mess. Honing in on the intro of the song, it lasts a full 2 minutes before any lyrics come in, and is some of the most intense playing in Green Day's entire discography. The bass line Mike lays down at the beginning sets the tone for the rest of the song's chaotic atmosphere, and speaking of which, his bass skills shine all over the album. This song, alongside the next, really does a great job at showcasing how talented a bassist he is. The only other albums that consistently come close after this, I'd argue, is the Trilogy in 2012. However, I do realize that the bass in the intro was probably looped, because holding down a bass line that sounds like this for 2 minutes would border on superhuman. This intro to me describes the thesis of the song better than any lyrics could, as, if the title of the song couldn't make it any clearer, It discusses what going through a panic attack is like, which both Mike and Billy Joe experienced in the past. I can't speak from experience because I've never had a panic attack at the time of writing this, although I've had events similar to an anxiety attack, but those two things are different, and I'm getting ahead of myself. But from what I've understood is that your heart begins to race, your chest tightens up, you begin to breathe heavily, and a sudden sense of dread pours over you, with some cases even seeing individuals not being able to speak while one is occurring, which may subtly be referenced in how the lyrics don't start for 2 minutes. But that feeling of overwhelming panic is conveyed immaculately in 2 minutes where no words are sung. When the lyrics do kick in, they're about what causes panic attacks, more or less, with what just may be another allusion to meth. But another cause that's mentioned in the chorus is the chaos in the world, with it described as,
well, the world is a sick machine breeding a mess of shit with such a desolate conclusion. Fill the void with I don't care.
Speaking from experience, the world can cause a lot of stress. It can make people feel like they can't do anything to fix things because of society's rules, so our minds spiral into a feeling of existential dread. The line in the second verse,
torn out of reality to a state of no opinion, liquid fate,
really hammers this sentiment home to me. Something else that really stuck out to me while researching is that Green Day have never played this song live. The reason is, Billy says it's just too damn hard and he's lazy. It's a bit of a cop-out, but, I mean, alright. Following that is Stuart in the Avenue, a personal favorite of mine from the album. This is a tried and true breakup song, with the title of the track being a reference to Stuart Street and Telegraph Avenue. It's unclear if the physical location holds any significance to the track's subject matter, as this song is about the same ex of Billy's who inspired the songs Good Riddance, What's Her Name, and Amanda, which is her name. Armstrong would later describe Stuart in the Avenue as, quote, a bitter song. The song, as I interpret it, is feeling like your life is going in one direction, but that's all suddenly ripped out of your hands by someone, so resentment towards this person builds. The chorus of the song touches on this especially.
well, destiny is dead in the hands of bad luck. Before it might have made some sense, but now it's all fucked up.
However, at the end of the song, he changes the line to,
we're all fucked up,
which may reference to both him and the ex, but also may be more broad to mean me, you, and everyone else. What's also neat is that the song may also imply that it was he who was at fault and was an idiot for even trying. As in the second verse, it switches to self-hatred, where he even refers to himself as a two-faced clown and the king of fools, while also maybe trying to convince himself that maybe breaking up with her wasn't the worst thing, but the chorus still reaffirms his anger. As I already touched on, this is probably my favorite song off Insomniac. While I do find the lyrics to be quite relatable, the overall sound of the song I think is what I enjoy the most, especially that bass at the start. And how the rest of the instruments drop out for Billy and the snare to sync up with one another. I honestly think the song was snubbed as a single. If there's any song that you'd know from this album, it's Brain Stew. Brain Stew was originally titled Insomniac during production, as I stated earlier. However, when the album was later dubbed Insomniac, the name was changed to Brain Stew, named after the nickname of James Washburn, a friend of the band. But I don't see why they needed to change the title, but I guess maybe they didn't want to do title tracks at the time. If the working title didn't give it away, this song is about the insomnia Billy Joe was facing at the time of the album's development, either from becoming a parent or, as heavily implied, drug use. And the metaphors used to describe the feeling of sleepiness are really clever. My favorite is,
I'm counting shit but running out.
As the song progresses, it's almost as if the insomnia keeps building, describing feelings of bloodshot eyes, dry mouth, facial numbness, paranoia, and others. Another personal favorite line of mine is,
the clock is laughing in my face.
I've been in similar situations to where it feels like no matter how hard I try to fall asleep, the passage of time will always mean there's less time for me to actually sleep. The time on the clock is always lit up, showing me what time it is. The song then devolves into an excellent guitar breakdown that's just the main riff but played faster, only for it to have a fucking aneurysm, Jesus Christ, and transitions into the next song, Jaded, a high-octane, straightforward punk track that doesn't relent in its energy, moving at a breakneck pace, being the shortest song on the album at a mere minute and a half. What I find interesting is that usually when there's a faster and slower song paired together, think Holiday and Boulevard of Broken Dreams from American Idiot, typically the slower of the two is placed second to feel like a come down after the high. But in this case, it's the opposite. Instead of a crash, it starts with that feeling, but is quickly juxtaposed, almost as if you're relapsing back into substances. This may even be slightly touched upon in the first verse.
Somebody came up outside like I'm falling up, until it stayed of regression. The expiration date, rapid like coming up. That's like maybe I'm direct.
In the chorus, there could be multiple interpretations as to what exactly he means by
always move forward. Jealous shame won't get you nowhere.
But what I think it means is that he's tried going in one direction in life, perhaps sobriety, but maybe that didn't work or it was the wrong path, which may explain the next line.
There is no progress. Evolution killed it all.
The song may also touch on the monotony of working life with the reference to working 9 to 5. However, much like Babs Vive Le Who, I think the lyrics here are supposed to take a backseat on this track. These two songs were released together in July of 1996, with some copies of the CD single in UK having the actual disc in the shape of a brain. I think that's pretty cool, honestly. I might want to try and find a copy. The songs were even paired for the music video directed by Kevin Kerslake. The section for Brain Stew is set in a landfill with the band sitting on a couch being towed around by a bulldozer. There's also cutaways to hula dancers, an old woman next to a chalkboard, and mealworms. This, coupled with the sepia tone applied to the footage, adds to the sense of surrealism. The video melds into the segment for Jaded, which sees the color restored and the camera work mimicking the energy of the song while Green Day performs in a basement or something. I don't know, you're never really given too good a look at it. Overall, it's a pretty good video in my opinion. Also, a remix of Brain Stew was featured in the 1998 Godzilla movie. Westbound Sign is actually a pretty out-of-place track in terms of lyrical content. This song is actually quite a hopeful piece in comparison to the anger that permeates the album, with it being about, as Armstrong put in a 2011 tweet, quote, "Westbound Sign is about Adrian moving to California from Minnesota." However, the lyrics spare enough personal details to allow for anyone to insert themselves into the song. Although anxiety is still present in the song, as the narrator's girlfriend is nervous about the unknown, and he's afraid she won't fit into the new environment. However, the second verse reaffirms that both, or at least she, is still determined to move, as the line
Watch out the rearview mirror and westward on
is alluding to how she isn't looking back and allowing herself to miss her old home. At this point, she's all in. Also, a reference to the song 2,000 Light Years Away off of Green Day's second album, Kerplunk, is made in the line
It's stretching 18,000 miles away.
2,000 Light Years Away is also about Adrian. Westbound Sign has oddly only ever been played once, and it was in 1994. It's still one more than Panic Song, though. And strangely, the song was featured in the first trailer for the movie Cars. Tightwad Hill. Yet another track that was the working title of the album. If you thought the last song was going to be a change in tone for the album and have things, be looking up and looking on the bright side of life, well, you'd be wrong. Also, why would they? There's only like 2 songs after it. Tightwad Hill is actually a real-life location in Berkeley, California, and in a 1995 Rolling Stone interview, Armstrong noted that, quote, "A lot of tweakers come and hang out up here, the crank victims and stuff. Not only that, but the hill overlooks a college football stadium, which during games, people often congregate there to watch without having to pay," which is slightly alluded to in the opening line.
Cheapskate on the hill, a thrill said come back, take it down.
What I think the song is about is looking back at the things you did many years ago or realizing in the moment that what you did or are doing just isn't fun and you regret wasting your life. Something I do find quite notable is that this is one of only 3 songs on the album to be written in the third person, the others being 86 and Westbound Sign. However, with those, they're to better emphasize the experiences of the band, or those close to them, from someone else's point of view. And also, Brat exists, and that's in the first person, but clearly isn't from the band's perspective. With Tightwad Hill, it could be about any of the people who partook in those activities, but these actions are described as mundane and self-destructive in retrospect. There's even an oxymoron on the lines,
living out a lie, but having the time of his life, ain't a different minute of his existence.
In the moment, it felt great, but you slowly begin to realize that you may have been wasting your life and could have been doing much greater things. I personally think that this is one of the more forgettable songs on the album, but it still sticks to that signature sound and structure that the rest of the tracks have, so it still is enjoyable. And I probably pissed a lot of people off by saying I forget about Tightwad Hill. Just roll with it, okay? This is just my opinion. Walking Contradiction is the closing track and my second favorite off the album. The name of the song, and to a broader extent its oxymoronic themes, come from the fact that Green Day was a punk band that got popular. which seems like something that doesn't make sense, exemplified in the ending line of the chorus. At the same time, the comments of selling out are restated in a sarcastic way throughout the song.
Smart ass, but I'll play it dumb.
And
I ain't got no right.
while also noting that the fame the band endured was a catch-22 for them.
A victim of catch-22.
But a more direct mention of the situation Green Day found themselves in comes right after the hook in the verse.
Because the shit's so deep you can't run away.
As the shit in question is them signing to Reprise Records, and they couldn't easily avoid the accusations of selling out. Speaking of such, there's
Talk is cheap and lies are expensive. My wallet's fat, and so is my head.
which also sarcastically relates to the wealth gained from being on a major label, but it can also be interpreted that since lying is expensive, he can afford to do it, which is also a contradiction since this song and Insomniac as a whole aren't them radically changing genre, so they aren't lying. But also at the same time, maybe it means that if they really wanted to lie to everyone about who they are and what they stand for, they could. This album is making me crazy. The opening line in the first verse really sets the theme of the song moving forward and draws the listener in, or at least it did for me. It's a common phrase that all of us know, but when coupled with the title, it gives a clear idea of the song's themes. Furthermore, it just sounds really good as an opening line to me. The song's structure is also a little unorthodox. Instead of your typical verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro, instead it has both verses back to back, chorus, first verse again, chorus, and then the end, which may play into the song's themes of contradictions, even if it's not that noticeable unless you're looking for it like me. Nearly every line of the song either undoes itself or does so in the following lyric, either touching on fame like I mentioned before, or how the world around us is a contradiction, such as the line,
Standard set and broken all the time.
Something else of note is that the main riff of the song originated as the guitar solo in Haushinka, a song originating from the Dookie years, but was later released on Nimrod in 1997, which would explain why the two sound eerily similar. Walking Contradiction was the final single released from Insomniac in August of '96, with the music video being directed by Roman Capola. This video is easily my favorite of the Insomniac videos, and is arguably my favorite Green Day music video overall. I don't know, the ones for 21st Century Breakdown and Jesus of Suburbia give it a run for its money. If you've ever wanted to know what Green Day in GTA would look like, well, first of all, I wonder why you've been thinking about that, and second, this video comes close to answering that question, as the band is just walking into town, causing utter chaos and destruction around them, and not giving a f***. Like, Trey, how do you not hear the sound of the truck barreling towards you? My favorite gag, if you can call these gags, is when Mike hits the button to cross the street and causes a guy to get electrocuted. They also do that trope where a guy's lifting a piano for literally no reason, only for it to drop because Billy Joe decided to pick up a rearview mirror. The video was so good, in fact, it received a Grammy nomination. Also, the video uses a slightly different mix of the song than the actual album. Like, Billy's voice is slightly more understandable, and the guitars are cleaner, and the drums are a bit more crisp with extra cymbals added. All in all, an amazing video. From there, the song and album as a whole just ends, and kind of leaves you out there. Before I wrap things up, I want to briefly mention the B-sides, because I know that people would complain about me forgetting about them. There's only 4, one of which being a cover, and all but one were made more readily available on Green Day's 2002 B-sides and rarities compilation, Shenanigans. I'm not really going to get too into these, especially their cover of I Want to Be on TV, as it's not a song they wrote themselves. The song Don't Want to Fall in Love, however, is a song that originated in the Dookie sessions before being included with Geek Stink Breath. And I already mentioned the mix-up of Do Da Da, which interestingly was not a B-side for Stuck With Me, but instead Brain Stew, with the song even being included on the Australian release of Nimrod. These songs are pretty decent, but aren't 100% necessary to listen to, but they're nice inclusions nonetheless. However, there's one B-side I left out. It's a pretty obscure song that I'm doubting most of you have ever heard before. A song that was so elusive it wasn't even included on Shenanigans. A song by the name of Good Riddance. Yeah, I don't know how common a fact this is, but as a B-side for Brain Stew, an early version of the song that would go on to become one of Green Day's biggest hits, Good Riddance, Time of Your Life, was included. This version lacks the Time of Your Life subtitle, as well as the strings, being just Billy Joe and an acoustic guitar. And what I really enjoy about the demo is that you can tell that he's being insincere. In the final version off of Nimrod, the message that this is a bitter breakup song is lost, as it's painted to be genuine. But in the prototype, it's apparent that Armstrong is trying to be sarcastic. You can just hear the shit-eating grin on his face as he sings. But I guess both versions are good at different things. The demo is better at conveying the original intended meaning, while the final is more ambiguous, allowing the listener to take away whatever meaning they want. If you want to see what the final version would have sounded like if it had ended up on Insomniac, there is this mix from St. Jimmy's stuff. And before you start commenting, oh my god, he forgot about Jar, he forgot about J.A.R.A. Jason Andrew. I didn't forget about it. How could I have? It's literally my favorite Green Day song. But I'm still not going to talk about it here for a couple of reasons. Number one, it wasn't a B-side or included on Insomniac proper, so it wouldn't even really count to begin with. And two, I think Jar requires its own video. And if any of you who are watching this know the story behind how Jar was written, I don't think that's something I can just casually skim over and it still be in good taste. And also on a personal level, I have a lot of sentimental attachment to that song. And I think that would be better conveyed in a standalone video where I'm just talking about the song. Think like the one I'm gonna do for X-Kid, if any of you remember the Uno Dos Tre video I made a while back. Oh, also about Jar. It was included in Dookie's 30th anniversary release, so yeah, it's clear that they associate this song more with the Dookie years than Insomniac. So if you were wondering if I was going to talk about Jar in this video, well, there's your answer. Now, how the f*** am I going to wrap this video up? With Walking Contradiction being the last song on the record, I really think that almost any other song on the album could have worked as a closer. It's not some big finale like 21st Century Breakdown or Dookie, All By Myself doesn't count. Not a reflective track after a climax like an American Idiot, Revolution Radio, or Warning. Instead, Insomniac just kind of stops. It said what it needed to say and doesn't overstay its welcome. And for it being just over half an hour, it sure flies by. Sure, nearly all the songs have similar feels, as they're composed of mainly just 4 power chords, which did lead me to forgetting most of the album, and to this day I still get some songs mixed up. And yes, the themes of alienation, frustration, and self-loathing that persist are pretty much just what it says on the tin. But simplicity isn't a bad thing. Just because there isn't some larger statement about society doesn't invalidate the album. Insomniac is considered one of Green Day's better albums for a reason, and I've seen many say that it's their favorite. With the generality of its subject matter, it's managed to still be relatable over 2 decades later, and can almost be seen as cathartic, not just for the band, but for the audience. Who hasn't been pissed off at the world before, and just needed to let it all out? Dialing things back, Insomniac is the band doubling down on the sound of the previous works, and being unafraid to get real with themselves and the listener. They were confident enough in who they were as a band, and wanted to prove that at the end of the day, they were still the same kids from Gilman Street, crafting an album that was darker, edgier, and angrier. So that was a lot to unpack. The funny thing is, Insomniac was an album that I originally had like no intention of covering anytime soon, but after getting into a discussion in the comment section of a St. Jimmy's Stuff video, I decided it was a good idea to maybe try and do a deep dive on it, because, I mean, the background behind how the album was made is pretty interesting, seeing as the band was really pissed off at a lot of things at that time. Even if these analysis videos do take quite a long time to make, and I doubt myself multiple times during production, but that's neither here nor there. So if you're new, subscribe, because things are going to be on this channel from now on. I really don't want to get into it. Also, huge thank you to everyone who responded to this Reddit post I made asking for info on the development of Insomniac. Y'all were a huge help. Thank you very much. So if you liked the video, then like the video. And stick around for more content like this just around the corner. And until next time, see you around.